Okay, I hope it's recording. Okay, sorry. So app.py is an application which I want to run. I can convert this into a container, run on AWS EKS, or I can put this inside my server EC2 and then run it there. But for both of them, my AWS EKS also runs on a server. Underlying, it also runs on a server, right? So essentially, I am running my application on a server. Okay. Now there is a third concept which is in AWS, that is there is a concept called as serverless. Okay. Now this serverless concept is again a misnomer. That means something we use wrongly here. But serverless doesn't mean there is no server involved. Serverless means that you as a user is not aware about it and you don't have to manage it. So serverless, there is also some server underlying. Okay, but you as a user is completely unaware about it. That means you as a user, if I put an arrow here, so these two servers, right? These two things are managed by user. This is the user, but this server is managed by AWS. Okay. And that is what serverless is in plain terms. So I'm trying to explain what is serverless first, and then we'll start with our Terraform thing to spin up a serverless function and deploy our application there. So app.py is my application. I have two options, server EC2 or an AWS EKS. But in both the cases, I am the one who manages AWS EKS as well as server. By the way, you don't completely manage it. It automatically is created for you, but you are still responsible for servers, right? Server patching and this and that. But here in this case, it's serverless. That means you do not directly interact with the serverless. You only deal with the interface called as Lambda. So Lambda is an interface, a service, a managed service for serverless, and you interact with that, and that internally takes care of any server requirements, CPU requirements, RAM requirements, and everything. Here you have to take care about that CPU requirements, RAM requirements. You have to choose what CPU, what RAM based on your workloads, this and that. But here you don't have to do anything of that sort. Everything is taken care by the server. Everything is taken care by the AWS. And another good thing here is once you spin up this server, it's going to charge continuously as long as it's up. But the advantage you get in Lambda is it only costs you when your function is running. If your function is just resting there, that means agar wo run nahi ho raha hai, no one is invoking that function, that means nothing will happen. Okay, that means there will not be any cost which you will incur. You will not get any cost. They will not charge you for having a Lambda function. They will only charge you for when your Lambda function is getting executed, and for the time duration your function is getting executed, it will charge you only for that specific period. So that's the advantage which you get in when you use Lambda. Okay, I'll show you that Lambda thing, how it works in here. Okay, so I go to AWS console. Let me open it. Why it's going to marketplace. Let me do this. Sign into console. Okay, and then I go to this thing called as Lambda. You can search it from here and you go to Lambda. And here you will see something like this. Then I already have one Lambda function already created here. I go to new, create function. You go to create function. You can give any name. You can say function 1, 2, 3, whatever. Then you have to choose a runtime because your function can have a specific requirement which is called as its runtime. That means it needs the compiler or the interpreter where the lines which you have written can get executed, compiled, and it can get executed. So Node.js is one example, Java is another example, Python, Go, it can .NET, it can be anything. I'm, let's say, choosing the Python. So I'm saying Python 3.8. Then you can choose few more things like this, the existing roles, because for Lambda or any service in AWS, you need to provide it with some permissions, because for running any service in AWS, it may need to talk to some other fellow services. It need to talk to S3. It can need to talk to logs, or CloudWatch, different services we have in AWS, and they cannot talk to each other unless you give that that service a specific permission. This we do it via roles, and I'll talk about roles in a while. But you do that role is something which you have to define. Right now, I'm saying create a new role with basic Lambda permissions. I can use an existing role also. This I will show you when I will use the Terraform. Right now, I'm simply saying create a new role with basic Lambda permission. I can click on, by the way, I have some other advanced settings. Don't touch it. I say create function. Okay, so once you create function, you get something like this. Okay, in the code portion you will have the code. यहाँ पे code लिखते हैं आप basically. Okay, अब मैंने Python choose किया तो उसने Python का एक random function यहाँ बना के दे दिया मुझे. And here the important part here is Lambda handler. So it's not that every Lambda, every application जो आपने लिखी है, it will just come and run here. It's not the case. You have to put something in your code so that it becomes Lambda conducive. It becomes Lambda friendly. So for running something in the Lambda, in AWS Lambda, you need to have some sort of handler, also called as Lambda handler. And in different programming languages, you implement it differently. Now you may again ask, हमें कैसे पता चलेगा? आपका job नहीं है. Your job, because you are getting trained as a DevOps engineer, it's not your job to write the code or even write the Lambda handler. But you should know that for running any application can run on Lambda only if it has a Lambda handler. A Lambda handler for Python looks like this. That means it has a function name as Lambda handler, but it can be anything. And then it has to have accept two arguments, event and context. And that's it. And inside, then you can do whatever you want to do. And again, you don't have to do it. Your developer will do it. Okay. But for a basic understanding, you should know the developer has to have this some sort of code snippet or some sort of mechanism so that it becomes Lambda friendly. Any code which developers write is not automatically Lambda friendly. So that's this part you need to understand. Here I am writing Lambda handler and writing event and context, and this is how it knows, the Lambda knows that it is how I can then run on my serverless cluster. Okay, that's the first thing. Then I can use test. I can test it whether it's running fine or not. I can say event name as new event, whatever, and I can run the events on it. Okay, I can simply say test, and it has run some tests. It has tried to pass these arguments to this function, and it is saying it is working. Okay, I can even see in the logs and the CloudWatch. So when I created a Lambda function, so CloudWatch in AWS is a place where you can see the logs from various services. So by default, Lambda is enrolled to publish the logs to my CloudWatch. Okay, and here I can see this is a log group, and then in this log group, I can see whatever is happening inside my Lambda. So जो भी logs generate होंगे, that all the logs can directly comes here. I can see what's happening inside my cluster, or sorry, inside my Lambda function. Whatever logs it emits, it directly goes to CloudWatch. Okay, let me come back here. What do we have here? Then we have monitor. In the monitor, you can see different graphs, very similar to Grafana, which we did last time, right? Invocations, error counts, this and that, all the things you will see here. Then in the configuration, there is something interesting. Now the question is how you will go and access this, right? Because I have deployed a function, but I want to access the function from somewhere, let's say from my browser. Then how will I go and do that? For that, there are two ways you can do. One is you will create another resource called as API Gateway. So API Gateway is a AWS way of handling different or handling traffic to different endpoints, including Lambda. But there's easy way also. Easy way is using a default Lambda functionality called as function URL. This function URL is very simple. You just click on create function URL. It asks you, basically what you are doing is एक URL बन जाएगा automatically, और वो URL will automatically route all the traffic from the browser to that specific function, and function will reply. Okay. Here you can put some AWS authentication to that user. I'm choosing none. And here I can go and click on additional settings, the different settings here, cores and this and that. But right now, just keep it simple. Do as none. The only problem with the none is, which is a big problem, that is, agar none kar dunga, to everyone can access it. Okay. And then imagine AWS Lambda is only charging you for the time it is running. And imagine some hacker get hold of it, or some entity which wants to trouble you get this URL. What they will do is they will put this in a script, and then script will continuously hit the URL, and then every time function will keep on running, and then it will start billing you. Okay, so try not to do this, and if you do this, please delete your Lambda function after your trials. So always go with the AWS IAM option. Anyway, I click on save. So the moment I click on save, I get a URL here, as well as it will start coming up on the top also, which is here. And when I click on this, it will give me the results. Hello from Lambda is coming from where? It's coming from my code, which is this one. Hello from Lambda. Okay, I can modify this so that it starts giving me something. Let's see if it works. I say Akash. And can I save it? I say deploy, updating the function. And if I go in URL, refresh, I get the changes. Okay. So this is the easiest way of deploying an application. So two takeaways from this whole small demo of the AWS Lambda. You can really deploy your application very, very quickly. Put it behind a public URL, and then people can just start using it. So it's that simple, super simple. Okay. Take this as an assignment. Try to do this manually. Create an AWS Lambda function. Try to write some more complicated code. If you're good in coding or you know what you're writing, try to write this, or you can Google it. You get some sample reference application, use that, put the code here and see how it's working, or just use a sample one, which is also okay. And there is also one more very, very good feature here. That means you can also run your containers. You see, author from scratch, user blueprint, container image. So that means you can run your containers also, but it will any container will just not run. You have to, as I said, anything which you want to run on Lambda has to be Lambda friendly. For that to happen, you have to make your code Lambda friendly using event handler. Using event handler. At the same time, you have to have your container. You have to put something in your container in your code so that it becomes Lambda friendly. So whatever containers you have created so far will just run directly there. No. Okay, you'll have to do something there. And another challenge which you have here is that it only can source the image from the Amazon ECR, Elastic Container Registry. You cannot put here Docker Hub URL and then it will spin up. It can only pick it from the Amazon ECR. Basically, your container has to be in the Amazon ECR. So that's another limitation, I would say. Okay, so these two challenges. Anyway, today we are not seeing the container thing. We are seeing the simple example. Okay. Next thing which I would show is Terraform. But before that, I would check if anyone has a question. Okay, so what I will do now is, let me save this. Let's jump into the Terraform thing, okay? I was showing the EC2 example. I have one example already done because I try before I show you, right? So I have done it here, but I will do the same thing here because I want to show you step by step. That's what you always ask me to do as well, right? So I will go click on main.tf. Okay, main.tf. So main.tf is my main file. By the way, Terraform can have different structure. There can be main file. The Terraform files can be divided into modules, right? So I'm not touching base on those advanced concepts in Terraform. Terraform can be used with just one file, main.tf, and that's what I'm showing right now. So main.tf can have all the information about that specific thing, specifying cluster, sorry, you can specify your resources, AWS, different AWS resources, bind them together, link them together, and all those things, right? Variables, then output variables, and this and that. So we'll just use main.tf file, which in itself covers your at least 70% of the concept of things. Then we can see later when you design more complicated infrastructure, maybe once everything, a lot of things within the same Terraform project, then yes, you may have to start using the modules concept here. Module concept is also not different. It is again the same combination of main dot, same combination, sorry, same types of files called as Terraform files. And then, but you will segregate the infrastructure instructions in different files for the ease of maintaining it. But for now, let's stick to one file called as main.tf. Okay. Next thing which you do is, the first thing which you do is always, okay, before that, you need to install Terraform, right? So for installing the Terraform, I already have installed it. I use something called as RTX, right? So RTX is a tool which you can use to install your application, install your softwares or command line utilities or whatever. So that's what I use, and I have already installed Terraform for myself. Okay. I have placed it actually outside, but you don't have to use Terraform basically. So you don't have to use RTX. You can use Terraform command line utility that you can install. I'm not showing you that because I think it's quite simple to do. So you install Terraform. Once you do a Terraform installation, then you can just run to see whether it's installed, right? So Terraform, and you will get to see this instruction. I mean, this output, and that proves that you have Terraform installed. If you don't see anything, that means you don't have it. So you have to install it. Okay. Maybe I can show you in this window. If you are using RTX, if you want to use it, then you have to just say in your tool versions, you have to say Terraform, and then it will install Terraform for you. Okay, but if you're not using RTX, then it's okay. You can just install it by yourself. Okay, so the next thing which I would do in Terraform is I need to because Terraform is not a tool which is only for AWS. Terraform can be used for many different providers. Let's call them providers. So AWS is one of the provider which Terraform supports. There can be Azure, there can be GCP, there can be Alibaba, there can be different kinds of clouds, right? Red Hat Cloud and this and that. It supports many of those. But here we are dealing with AWS. And when you want to use Terraform to deploy your infrastructure on any specific cloud platform, then you have to provide the provider. You have to mention the provider name. So you say Terraform, and then you need to say required providers. And then, by the way, I'm getting the code generated automatically because I have this what do you call it? Call it GitLab Copilot, and that this automatically generates the code for me. Okay, so you don't have to use it, of course. I need to say 4.0. So any version above 4.0 is what I want. So that's what I would say here. So this is the first line I need to provide. So required providers, I need to have a provider, and that provider is AWS provider, and that's how Terraform is able to create or interact with AWS, because once I say AWS required provider as AWS, only then Terraform can download certain dependencies which can interact with AWS. If you don't do this, then it will not be able to do anything with the AWS. And then in the provider settings, I need to provide the region. Okay, so I can provide some more things here. I can provide some credentials and credentials profiles. I think that's how I have done it here, if I am not wrong. No, here it's region, but you can provide some settings on. Okay, I don't have it there, but you can provide some credentials, AWS credentials, and this and that. But I have those credentials already present in my shell. If you remember, last time I showed you that I export those variables. So I export AWS access keys, I export AWS secret key in my shell. Okay, once I export them, the export will look like this. एक्सपोज AWS एक्सेस की, यहाँ पे एक्सेस किया जाएगा आपका एक्सपोर्ट या सीक्रेट की है, सीक्रेट किया जाएगा, and then you simply export this, you run this command on your here, and then it will export. So access key या secret key will be available there, or you can also save it in your AWS folder. एक AWS folder बना के वहाँ पे credentials file में भी आप सेव कर सकते हो. Terraform automatically वहाँ भी जाके चेक कर लेता है अगर है क्या, नहीं है तो वो it will complain. So then you have to do a provider. Okay, let's do step by step. Let me cd to my IAC. Okay, you see the moment I did this, it automatically exported my variables. I will not show the value of the variables, otherwise you all will know. So I will not show it, but I have it there in my envrc file. I showed you this file, but real values I have that in envrc, and then I use this utility called as diren, which automatically loads it for me. Okay, so I'm using some sort of small utilities to do this automatically for me. But if you are not aware about it and you don't care also, then you can directly export it. The idea is that it automatically exports those variables in my current shell session. Okay, then next thing which I would do is I am on IAC, then I will do a cd to Lambda EC2 Lambda demo, Lambda demo. Okay. Let me put a 1 in front of it. Okay, so CD1, what the hell?
Terraform, first we have to do it.
Ah,
Terraform.
sorry, thank you very much. Someone is paying attention. Good. Okay. Alice, fine. So I'm there. Then I will simply say Terraform. The first command I need to run is Terraform init. Okay. Terraform init means Terraform initialize. And what it does is it downloads something. Okay. And that's something, it downloads what it needs to do for that specific provider. So it downloads the provider specific dependencies. Okay, so it downloaded some sort of utility, which is Terraform provider Linux utility. And this is what will do the magic of interacting with the AWS. So these two lines were important for me. Okay, now I have done the init. It will not do anything because I am not giving it any resource. The next thing which I would do is, let me go to the diagram again. Okay, where is my diagram? Here. To run anything in your cluster, or sorry, to run anything in your EC2 or in AWS or anything in your AWS services, what you need to do is, let me open grid diagram. Okay, the first thing you need is VPC, right? Because everything runs in a VPC. Of course, you need to first create an account, but we assume you have it. So VPC is the first thing you will go and create. Then you will do what? Then you will have some subnets. Subnets is what? Subnet is a small network within the VPC. So VPC can be very big. It can be big based on what you add there, of course, but it is just logical representation of a network. And then within VPC, you can have sub networks. Okay, that is represented by subnets. Okay, subnets has things like CIDRs, right? CIDRs is the network range or IP range which is there for that specific subnets. Subnet means अगर कोई भी machine मैं इसमें attach करूंगा इस subnet में, so it has to have an IP address, and then IP address has to have a range that within this range I will give this IP address to this specific machine or resource, and that range is specified by CIDRs. Okay, so that CIDR is you need to provide. Then what else? Then you need to have security groups, right? Security groups you link. This is actually the firewalls, right? What goes in, what goes out, right? So let's call them a firewall. They're not the exact firewall, but that's what it is basically. Same, but different, but still the same. Which is to control what goes in, what goes out. That's what firewall also do based on IP addresses. Security groups has what? Security groups has ingress and egress. It has ingress and it has egresses. Egresses is what goes out. Ingress is what comes in. In is what's coming in from outside. Egress is what's going out from inside. Okay, so security group has to give, you have to have these two settings in the security groups. Once you have this setup, only then you can have some resource, some AWS resource, which you can provision. So your AWS resource which you create lives in one of your subnets. Basically, it lives one of a subnet. Subnet lives in a VPC. Subnet is defined by CIDRs, and then it lives here. And security groups is what decides what comes in and what goes out using the ingress and egress. So that's the relationship. CIDR, I have made it part of subnets because that's how your subnet will decide what IP address to give this. So this, if this is living in this subnet, the subnet CIDR will decide what IP address to give to your specific resource. In this case, let's say our AWS resource is Lambda. So this is what we will try to do in next 5-10 minutes because we are reaching towards the end now. Okay, so this is the setup which we will try to create. In the previous example with EC2, when I gave you, I did not create VPC, I did not create subnets, I did not create security groups, and I only created this one EC2 instance, right? And I already pre-created them and then I just reuse them. But this time we'll try to create all of them from scratch and we see how it works. Okay, next thing I need to do what? So that's what I showed you. I need to have VPC, I need to have subnets, I need to have security group, then I can do something here, right? So let's start creating it. First thing I need is VPC. Then next thing I would need is my subnet. Then I would need is security group. Then I would need my Lambda function. Oh, but before that, I also need a role, IAM role. Then I need IAM policy, and then I need to link, okay, IAM policy attachment, and then Lambda function. Okay, so these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 thing I need to do so that my Lambda function becomes available on my cluster. So let's start creating them. Okay, first thing, VPC. For creating anything, because in AWS everything is a resource, right? So you need to create the resource VPC, you need to create a resource subnet, you need to create resource security group, and then you have to find a way to link them, right? So I will start with the resource. A resource is a keyword coming from the Terraform itself. Okay, so when I say resource, I can then provide like this. This is understand this is a plugin which is coming from the Terraform itself. I can go and check it also. So I need to, let's say, don't know how to create it. Okay, what I will do is I will say Terraform AWS VPC create. Then I will go here, Terraform registry, click here, and Terraform registry contains the list of all the plugins which you can use. And these are called as plugins. Let's understand them as a plugin, which is there in the Terraform. They are already provided to you by Terraform ecosystem. And then you can use it to do your things or spin up things. And it contains all the detailed documentation of how that can be used. That is also what I use, right? So I don't remember all of this at all times. When I want to do something, I know where to find information. So I come here, I see I need to create a VPC. Well, I've done it many times in the past, so I just know it. But in your case, if you're learning for the first time and you don't know, and you just Google it, you will get to know from the main registry how to use it. And then you will use it exactly what they ask you, how they ask you to use it. Okay, and that's what I have also done here. So AWS VPC will go and create the VPC for you. Okay, then what I'll do is I will go back here and I'll start the thing. Okay, so I'm saying resource AWS VPC, which is the name of the plugin, and then I can provide the name which I want to give it, and I'm, let's say, saying Akash VPC. Okay, I'd say Akash VPC. Okay, and then here I can provide some information. I'm not providing the CIDR at the moment because CIDR I will decide in my subnet. Okay, so I'm not providing it here. Or do I have to? So first, okay, my Copilot says I have to give it. Wait, let's check the. Well, I have to, because I have to provide it with some. I have to do it, okay, because I have to provide the IP range from what is from where my IP range will start for the specific VPC. And whenever you see like this 10.0 something, this is like the reserved private IP addresses. Okay, so usually your CIDR block starts from this, and this 16, this 32 means how many bits of your IP address is representing your network. Okay, and this gives you a clue about how many IP IP address will be available if you give the CIDR block as 16. If you have confusion about it, you can use a CIDR utility, CIDR check. You can use this one. So if I go and say 10.16 like this, calculate. So it gives me that the first 16 bit, which is like 8 bits are here and 8 is here, and then 8 is here and 8 is here. So there's total 32 bits. Okay, the first 16 bits represents the network, and the remaining bits represents the hosts. And just with these two values, I can have 65,000 machines or resources or IP addresses I can provide within this CIDR block. So when I say this 10.0.0.0.0/16, this means I can have the first two as the network representing my network. That means I cannot touch it, but the remaining I can. Okay, remaining IP addresses can be used to provide the IP address for whatever resource or machine or server or whatever I attach with my VPC. Okay, that's what CIDR refers to here. Okay, so here I can provide, I'm creating a VPC for myself for my private use. So I can give a CIDR block as 10.10.0.0, and then I'm saying 16. I can say 24 also. Okay, but if I say 24, I'm bit restricting myself, because if you see, if I say 24 here, it gives me only 256 total hosts, right? Just one bit is gone. Subnet mask is 2555555. It means I have exhausted these three. These three represents the network, but I only get one bit which I can play around with. Okay, anyway, so I will go back here again, and I say 24. CIDR block is this. Then I can provide maybe the name Akash VPC. The tags his name as Akash VPC. I can give some other name, but I'm choosing to use the same name here. The same name will be reflected in my AWS account. Okay, so a VPC is created. Then I will go and create my subnet. So the same thing, same approach I will do. Here I will use AWS subnet. AWS subnet is the name of. This is the name. By the way, this IntelliSense is automatically coming because I have installed extension, Terraform extension. So you have to install a Terraform extension. If you do that, this one, if you do that, then it will automatically show you the IntelliSense. I'm getting two sort types of intelligence. I'm getting automatic code generation using GitHub Copilot, but I'm also getting the intelligence. So what you see here like this is coming from the plugin which I've installed in my Visual Studio Code. Okay, here I'll say, okay, instead of Akash, let me make it a bit short. Let's say AKT, and same thing I will use here, AKT, and I'll say AKT subnet. Okay, okay, I'm getting some code generation here. So this for I will use that. The cider block, I will use 10, I can use 10.0.1.0 and 24. Okay, so I am using the, okay, here 24, but I have to do this 16. This should be 0, my bad. Okay, so 16 means I am giving this as my, I'm using these 2 bits as the network identifier and only these 2 for the remaining IP addresses. And then I'm saying I'm using these 2 starting from 1.0 till, and I'm consuming these 2 bits for my subnet. So my subnet is just one subnet I have. I'm going to create, and all of that will be using these 2 bits. That means I have 65,000 IPs in this subnet. Okay, then I will do the, by the way, if you're a bit confused about this, I would suggest to read it. I've given you some primer on how some concept of how this works, CIDR thing and networking and all this IP addresses will work. If you still have doubt, you will have to actually read it. I'll give you some good links. We can talk about it also, but I will only talk about it once you go through it. Otherwise, it's hard to explain me. So you have to have some understanding of what IP address is, how networking really works. So I don't want to explain those basics here because we have some important things to cover. Okay, but CIDR blocks understand this as IP addresses. So we have a VPC. Inside VPC, you have many IP addresses. Some part of the, so when you create a VPC, it comes with a collection of IP addresses. And these IP addresses, you can define the range. CIDR is always about the range. So first 2 is representing the network, but the other 2 is representing how many IP addresses it can have. Then you're creating a subnet. Subnet is a small sub network within that big network. And then what is the IP range of that sub network? You represent it using another CIDR block. And here I'm saying I will use this 2 portions to give the IP addresses to any resource or machine which gets added inside this subnet. So this is the whole thing about CIDR. Okay, now VPC I've done. I have subnet here. Then maybe I will do some tagging also. Let me add some tags. Name, oops, sorry, name is, okay, I'm giving it name as AKT subnet. Okay, VPC ID. Okay, so subnet has to attach with the VPC ID. This was automatically generated by my GitHub Copilot. But what we are doing here is whatever VPC it's creating, I have to get that and link it in the subnet, because subnet is part of the VPC, right? So how will I map it automatically? Okay, so in the diagram, if you see, VPC has subnets. So I need to create VPC, I need to create subnet, but I also need to link it. Otherwise, how AWS will know where to, under which VPC the subnet has to be created? So that linking automatically can be done in Terraform using this format. And what it is telling me, it's saying to connect this subnet to existing VPC or a VPC which Terraform is still creating can be done by this syntax. So AWS VPC, which is this one, AKT VPC, which is this one, name, and then ID. ID is what's going to be generated once this is created. जब ये create होगा तो इसमें एक ID generate होगा रन टाइम पे, और जो ID होगा वो मुझे यहाँ सेव करना है जब मैं सबनेट बनाऊंगा. एंड इट रन्स इन अ सीक्वेंस. पहले VPC क्रिएट होगा, उसका आईडी जनरेट होगा, फिर वो आईडी जो है मुझे यहाँ मिल जाएगा AWS VPC AKT VPC में. आई विल गेट दैट आईडी हियर. ओके, सो नाउ लेट्स जस्ट रन दिस स्क्रिप्ट. अभी हम इतना ही चला के देखते हैं. ओके, टू सी द इफेक्ट. देन आई से Terraform apply. Okay, when you do Terraform apply, it tells you it वो क्या करेगा, main.tf को चेक करेगा, main.tf को चेक करेगा state file को. There is a file called as tf state file. It will compare or it will also check in the AWS cluster to see इस type का कोई चीज वहां पर है क्या. अगर नहीं है, okay, then it will say I will try to create it, and then it will tell you what it will create, but it will not create it. It will ask for a permission. It will say if you do this, ये सब create हो जाएगा. Do you want it? I said yes, I want it. So I'll say yes here. It will go and create a VPC and will also create a. It's saying resources to added, 0 change, 0 destroyed. I can go and validate it. Okay. I can come here and I will come here. Not here. Okay. And then I can go to VPC. I can click on VPCs and here I have this VPC, AKT VPC जो मैंने अभी बनाया है. Okay, this is a VPC ID, and the same VPC ID will then automatically is linked in my subnet. This is my subnet. If I open it, this is the same VPC ID which I have just created. And the automatic linking कहाँ से हुई? From my main.tf file. This one. So this one succeeded. This operation succeeded. Okay, now let's do something else. Okay, now next thing was security group. Let's create the security group. This I think you have done it many times because जब भी आप एक security group बनाते हो, whenever you do security, whenever you want to create an EC2 instance, you have to create a security group, and security group you provide the firewall rules of what goes in, what goes out. Okay, so I will go and create a security group because we have some less time. I don't want to type it the whole thing. Let me just quickly use my GitHub Copilot, which is generating the code automatically for me. Okay, I will do this. So AKT security group description allow this, then VPC ID, I'm using AWS VPC, which is this one, and then AKT VPC. So always remember, this is the name of the plugin. This is the name which you give. So you're saying मुझे जो value है security group में value है वो VPC की जो ID है वो यहाँ से लेके आओ. VPC करो, AKT VPC करो, उसमें से ID मिलेगा, वो मुझे basically चाहिए to use for creating this security group and attaching it. Okay, so I have name. This VPC ID is what I want. Description हटाओ, भी नहीं चाहिए मुझे. Okay, then I have to define the ingress and egress, right? So ingress I have it. Egress I will define the same way, but मुझे HTTPS नहीं चाहिए. I want, let's say I want from 0 to क्या होता है इसका, the maybe 6,000 whatever. Okay, usually there's this figure called a 6,500 or something. Okay, let's just say 65,000. Okay, from till this port I need TCP, and I can define the CIDR block as 0.0.0.0/0, which means everything. So ingress I am opening it for, which is not good. Make sure you put something which is restrictive. Don't give a blanket approval for or allow it from everywhere. Okay, so limited access, but I'm, for the sake of explaining this, I'm simply doing this like this. Description not needed, it's not HTTPS anyway. Egress, just remove it. Egress also, egress is what is required from inside. Right now I don't need it because it's just a Python script, so I will not need it because my Python script is not calling anything, but still I will use this like this. Okay, so my egress and ingress is also set up. So name is AKTSG, VPC ID, ingress and egress. Okay, I can do a quick Terraform apply, but we know what's going to happen. It's going to create a resource, which is something which we expect it to do. So let's not do this separately. Okay, IAM role. So next thing which you need to do is creation of the IAM role. And here, let me do the same thing. Let me use this generated code, and I will modify this. So for creating an IAM role, I will say AWS IAM role, and I'll say AKT IAM role. Name I will provide, and in the policy, I need to provide this specific JSON file or JSON string. What it will do is it will tell my code, my role, that whenever Lambda resource request for something, please allow it. So I am saying here principal as service principal मतलब कौन request कर रहा है उस role के लिए. This is called as assuming the role. I think I need to explain it more, but we don't have time. But I will like try to explain this role. This is called as the concept of assuming the role. So जब lambda क्रिएट होगा, उसको हो सकता है किसी और सर्विसेज से बात करनी पड़े. फॉर एग्जांपल क्लाउड वॉच अपने आप में अलग अपनी सर्विस है, हो सकता है उसको उससे बात करनी पड़े, राइट? So for that, Lambda has to have the access to CloudWatch, which it cannot directly have. So you have to give them some mechanism to Lambda so that Lambda can then talk to that specific service, for example, here CloudWatch, and then freely able to send it logs directly to that CloudWatch, right? And to do that, it will cannot do it automatically unless you give Lambda some permissions. So यहाँ पे जो दो कॉन्सेप्ट है आई एम रोल का और आई एम पॉलिसी का, इट इज द सेम थिंग विच आई एम ट्राइंग टू एक्सप्लेन. तो जब भी आप कोई भी सर्विसेज बनाते हो, उसको आपको रोल देना पड़ता है, रोल और रोल के साथ पॉलिसी अटैच करके देना पड़ता है. अदरवाइज lambda will not be able to, or any service will then not be able to access that specific service. Okay, in my case I am giving it a permission for connecting to logs or CloudWatch here. Okay, so I have a resource set up here. Okay, let me quickly check. IAM IKT IAM role, AWS IAM role, IKT role. Okay, end of file version statement. This is appeared to be okay. Okay, but this appears to be, can I use something else here? Assume role policy. Let me say, so JSON code, JSON and code. Okay, and then inside it I can provide this value close, and then I will give this value here. So my JSON code is done, and then use this. Okay, so my resource is also done. So I have an JSON code is a function in Terraform. I can use it to encode my JSON file within it. So I've created my IAM role. Then I will have to go and create an IAM policy. I will try to take a session on roles and policies maybe later, but I have to complete this example quickly now. Okay, let me use this. So IAM policy I've created IAM AWS IAM policy, AKT IAM policy. The same thing I'm doing here, but you see what I'm doing. I'm saying IAM policy is this, IAM role is this. Okay, so I'm saying एक role बनाओ, create a role, and that role is whenever. Role क्या कह रहा है? Role कह रहा है whenever a service, which is a Lambda service, tries to access something, please accept it. Let it assume the role. So जैसे ही Lambda बनाने की कोशिश करेगा कुछ कहीं पर भी, सबसे पहले it will come here in the AWS and assume the role. And then what I'm doing, I'm creating a policy that whoever assumes this role, give it the permission of these things. So what is the action which the assumer of this role will have or can do? It can do create log group, it can create log stream, it can put log events. Why it is there? For CloudWatch. Okay, so these two policies, these are the minimum two policies which Lambda require, because Lambda doesn't have a server. I mean, you don't have access to server. So whatever is happening in the Lambda has the information on the logs about it has to go somewhere, and that somewhere is CloudWatch. And Lambda has to have this access to the CloudWatch. Lambda cannot directly have access to CloudWatch. It is not allowed. So you have to do something so that Lambda can assume a role, and the role has a policy, and thereby Lambda can then access it and get the permission for a short time, not always, but for a short time. The moment it wants to do something, the roles will automatically be assumed, and then it can really interact with that specific service. So this is why we are doing the IAM role, and this is why we are doing the IAM policy. This could be a bit confusing. I can, if you're doing it for the first time or you don't are not very familiar with it, this can be a bit daunting. What really is happening here? I've given you an explanation, but there's no harm in reading the official documentation, AWS roles, and it really explains it in great detail and with great clarity. What is role, why it is needed, etc. And everything it is explaining here. But we can discuss it again. But I would like you guys to read it. Once you read it, we can talk about it as again, and then maybe it makes more sense when I explain later. Okay, for now, we'll keep it like this. AWS IAM role created, AWS IAM policy I've created. The next step is I have to attach it, right? I have attached it, resource, AWS IAM role policy attachment, AKT IAM role policy attachment, and then the role which is coming from here. You see linking the role which is created here, AWS IAM role, AKT IAM role, AWS IAM role, AKT IAM role dot name. Attach it with the policy ARN, which is AWS IAM policy. This one, AKT IAM policy is the name dot ARN. Attach it with that. Okay, I can then now quickly run the Terraform apply. Once I do Terraform apply, it will apply, it will find out what's missing and see in the Terraform state, this file was empty before, remember? Now it is not because it has created something on the AWS cluster, AWS account of mine, and it is showing you those details here. So Terraform state is an important concept. It means it stores the information of what Terraform has created from this machine. So इस मशीन से जो भी मैंने टेराफॉर्म के इंस्ट्रक्शंस रन किए हैं उन सब की इंफॉर्मेशन टेराफॉर्म ने क्या बनाया है, व्हाट इज created and maintained by Terraform is stored in Terraform state. And Terraform, before it does anything, it always try to find this Terraform state file, and based on that it operates. So now I will say yes, and once I say yes, it will go and create the role, create the policy, etc, etc, based on this. Okay, it has created role and the policy, and the attach the role with the policy, and you can validate it. So every time you do something, it's good, you can go and check it here. So I can check this in the roles, right? So I can go to IAM and I can check it in the roles. AKT IAM role is created. Okay, I have attached a policy. Policy मतलब permission. जब भी कोई आप चीज बनाओगे, इट कैन बी यूजर ग्रुप, इट कैन बी एनीथिंग, पॉलिसी के अंदर लिखा होता है क्या अलाउड है उसको, व्हाट इज अलाउड फॉर दैट स्पेसिफिक थिंग और स्पेसिफिक एंटिटी हु अज्यूम्स दिस रोल. सो रोल, इस रोल को जो भी अज्यूम करेगा, अज्यूम मतलब मैं इस रोल को अब ले रहा हूँ, आई एम समवन बट आई एम टेकिंग दिस रोल. दैट इज व्हाट इट मींस व्हेन यू से अज्यूम अ रोल. अज्यूम मतलब मैं अब ये रोल ले रहा हूँ. अब जब जो अगर मैं उस रोल को ले लूंगा तो परमिशंस भी मिल जाएंगे उसके साथ में, राइट? सो लैम्डा को मैं इंस्ट्रक्शन दे रहा हूँ कि लैम्डा तुमको जब भी क्लाउड वॉच में लॉग्स भेजना हो, मिस्टर लैम्डा, व्हेनेवर यू वांट टू सेंड लॉग्स टू क्लाउड वॉच, you assume this role, and once you assume this role you also get the permission. This is the whole thing about role and permissions. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to say here. In the roles, permission is this, but can I show you the trust? Okay, here. So here I'm saying Lambda, Mr. Lambda, whenever principal service as Lambda comes here, assume this role. You can also configure this with your user. For example, your user doesn't have a specific permission. Then you can create a role and you can define that user here. So whenever you want to do this or interact with it, any service, and you have that permission, then you can make your user assume this role basically, and then you'll get the permission. So this is how this whole thing works. Okay, so I have my roles also created. I have my policies also created. Okay, let me open this. Okay, now comes the Lambda function. The real deal will come here. Okay, to do that, I need to create a application here, right? So I will go here, create a new file. I'll call this app.py. Okay, and here I can write some code of Python. It can be anything, but I will just keep it simple. But if you remember, I need to provide the Lambda handler, right? So I will say Lambda underscore handler. Then I have to say event. It is generating the code. Good. So let it generate it. Hello from Lambda, same code which is there. So I'm using the same code. The Lambda handler event context something something. Okay. Then I will come back to my main.tf file. Okay. And here I will start writing the resource. Resource is AWS Lambda function. Okay. And then here I can provide the name as AKT Lambda function. Okay, it is again generating the code. Let me use this. So file name as zip. Okay, so whatever you are generating, you have to convert it into a zip file. So it can be any function, but you have to convert it into zip file. So let me quickly convert this into zip. I'll use zip app dot zip and then app dot py. So name of the file and name of the zip I need. I got app dot zip here. Okay, so that's what I will go and give. So file name becomes app.zip. Function name becomes AKT Lambda function. Fine. Role, I want what role for this? I want AWS IAM role. AWS IAM role. This one, AKT IAM role. So AWS IAM role, AKT IAM role, and it's ARN. So I need to provide the role to the Lambda. Otherwise, Lambda will not be able to submit. It logs to the CloudWatch. So I'm instructing that for my Lambda function to assume this role, which I'm already creating. Okay, then handler here is the name of the function and the name of the file. Okay, so name of the file I have is app. Name of the function is Lambda handler. Function name is this one, Lambda handler. Name of the file is app.py. So I'm saying where I need to tell my Lambda that where is my Lambda handler. My Lambda handler is in app and then Lambda handler. Okay, runtime is this, timeout, memory size, fine. Runtime I have to provide, right? Because it's my Python application. Then I have to also mention where, in which VPC and which subnet I need to provide this. I need to have this, can create this Lambda function. So VPC, I am saying AWS subnet, AKT subnet, ID. Security group, AWS secret group, AKT SGID. From where I'm getting this, right? I'm just repeating again and again. Whenever you see this kind of notations, it means I'm generating it somewhere at the top. Okay, so I'm saying AWS subnet dot AKT subnet. You see, AWS subnet, AKT subnet dot ID. AWS security group, AKT SD dot ID. Okay. And this is how I will get my VPC configurations. And this is how I am telling that this Lambda function has to be spinned up in this specific subnet IDs with this security group. Okay, fine. I think I can now then run Terraform, apply. Let's see what happens. Okay, let it run. Yes. Okay, so whenever you want to see मेरे cluster पे क्या चल रहा है, if you want to see what is up and running on my cluster, you always look for TF state. TF state will tell you everything. What it has created, what is the current value of what it's created, unique ID and everything. Okay, so it will tell you everything. We'll talk about TF state, how to manage TF state later, because TF state, it's not a good idea to keep TF state on a local machine. It's has to be placed somewhere so that different people can actually handle your cluster. अगर आपके मशीन पे बनाया तो फिर आप ही हैंडल कर सकते हो कि आपके ही Terraform cluster, आपके ही पास TF state file है. No one can then modify it, right? So it's good practice is that you keep it this TF state somewhere in the cloud so that it can be accessible from many places. So that part we'll see later. For now, let's see what is happening here. AKT, IAM role, Lambda. Okay, so example lambda function 1, 2, 3. Okay, it also supposed to create one more AKT lambda function. It should create. Let's see. Creating. Where it's creating. Example VPC function. What is the name of the function? AKT
Still it's
lambda.
creating, sir.
I know, but by this time it's usually sometimes automatically comes here. If it's not coming here, I'm suspecting something not right. That's why. Still two lambda functions. Come on. No, something is definitely wrong. It doesn't take this much time actually. So there is something I may have done wrong here because of which it's not working. Huh? I don't know where I screwed up. Okay, it may take some time for me to locate it. I don't want to hold you because we already spent like 2.5 hours now working with this. So I will fix this script, guys. I'll fix this, whatever is not working, and I'll publish it. By the way, I already have an example which I created here. So that example already works. I have to see why this is not working. And I'll fix it and I'll upload the code. So what you guys have to do now is once it runs, it will go and create the function here. Okay, that's what it will do. And then you can associate a function URL with it. That part also we can see, but we'll see that maybe next time. Let's not. I don't want to keep you all for more time, but I am still open for questions if you have any. We can talk about the questions. Clear? Is it clear for you guys?
Yes.
Did you guys understand what we are doing here?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So fine. If there's no questions, we can end the call. But with a note from my side, I will create an assignment for this. So please try to do this. Install Terraform and try to write these scripts. A lot of the code which I have shown you is available online. So if you let's say get stuck with what to write here, you can anytime go to the Terraform registry and see how they are using it. I've told you the building blocks. The building blocks are these: VPC, subnet, CIDRs, firewalls, AWS resource. Right, and this pattern is common for everything. Every time you want to create something, you need to start with this. Okay, so try do this. It's not try to do this. It is not that complicated. It's rather quite simple.
Sir, from
Only
where we get that policies and rules? Code.
which one?
Policies. I am
Document
policy and rule.
documentation.
Okay.
Right.
I will
So
check.
whenever you don't know this, whenever you have doubt, check the official documentation. It has all the details basically, right? So if you go to assume roles, right? We're talking about assume roles. AWS assume roles. So you guys need to generate this habit of going to the documentation rather than simply Googling and checking the Stack Overflow. Okay, so this tells you everything with great details basically. Okay, for example, I go to roles, AWS roles. Okay, you can check the roles and concepts. Common scenarios. Wow, I can't show you. Okay, like this. So similarly, you can find that here. If you want, let's say, want to have the Lambda created, but actually the real string which I have got here, you can get it from the AWS Lambda. Let's see this. Okay, let's see this. AWS Lambda serverless documentation. So all I'm saying is there are enough official, legitimate documentation from Lambda, from Terraform, from where you can really get to see this. I'm not really jumping into the right URL here. Is it here? Yes, developer guide. Okay, so you will, once you start reading this, then you will come across these kind of strings, like what to put there and how to do this, and etc. etc. Okay, let's see if I can quickly show you. Well, I can't, but it's somewhere in these documentation. And sometimes, let's say you
Okay, I
get,
will check it.
yeah. See, why I'm showing you this is because I always get this question from all of you, like, where did you get this? Right? Where did you get this? I get this from Copilot for now when I was demoing it, but originally I get this from various resources over internet, from official documentation, from Lambda documentation, sometimes from Stack Overflow also, but that is not always legitimate. Sometimes it can be buggy. So it's always good to scan the official documentation and pull it from there. Okay, the same thing here goes here, same thing goes here. And you can also do this directly from existing resources which you have there, right? So you can go to your IAM, and in IAM you will have some existing roles and policies, right? You can open any of the existing roles and policies. Okay, for example, this, and then from here also you can actually see the what goes inside the roles, in the policies, what goes inside the policies. All you need to all you need to know is to know what these tags mean, what action means, what the source means, etc. Okay, what is principal, what is service, and this part, once you understand, then it's not that difficult to know what it is. Okay, so try it out, read it. We'll discuss again. If you don't understand these roles and policies, we'll try to go through it again in the next session. Okay.
Okay, sir.